Official Server Recap. Hey guys, what's up? The latest official server patch is here, and things are about to get wild. We've got buffs, nerfs, and game-changing adjustments that could flip the meta on its head. Let's recap everything you need to know before you hit the battlefield. First up, we have the buff on Balmond. The damage increase on each hit from his second skill is now higher, from 7.5 to 8.5%. And the maximum damage increase is also improved from 60 to now 68%. This should give our beloved hero the extra power he needs to cope up with the current meta. Next is Matilda. She can now cast her first skill without the need to stop for a moment, just like this. As you can see, she's no longer stopping. And they also made adjustments to her skill range. Skill 1 is now bigger, which means more enemies to hit. However, her second skill range is now smaller. That means it's harder to give shield to allies that are too far. Next, we have Nolan. His first and second skills will have a slightly longer cooldown with an additional 0.5 seconds. In exchange, his ultimate will have a new effect where it can slow enemies by 30%, and its cooldown is also shortened by 3 seconds. So a more spammable ultimate, but his other skills had to take a hit. Next, we have the 4 heroes whose mana stats are removed. We have Claude, Arlott, Natalia, and Grok. Claude had the biggest effect because now he can use other emblems like Assassin and Marksman. Arlott players will have a field day in the battlefield. Now that his mana is removed, the only limitation in using his second skill are the marks. But that's not all, because they also buffed him with a shorter passive cooldown, from 8 down to 7 seconds. Natalia Roamer players will love this update. No mana means you can focus more on assassinating the enemy marksman. And finally, we have Grok. Add Guardian Helmet and the game could end without you ever recalling to the base. Overall, I think Claude and Arlott are the biggest winners here. There's a big impact to their game style. Expect to see them more in your ranked games this season. The effects on Grok and Natalia, on the other hand, are pretty so-so, I might say. It's good but not as game-changing as the first two. Next, we have Chip, where the developers aim to enhance his teamfight effectiveness while reducing his ability to roam across the map. His ultimate can now immobilize just like this. On the old version, it can only slow enemies around the skill. And then we have the longer cooldown on his special skill, from 20 to now 60 seconds. This should reduce how often he moves from one lane to the other in a short time span. Next up is Terizla. The developers noticed he has a strong presence in the early and mid game. To balance, they had to make the following changes. Passive damage reduction is now lower in the early levels, but it becomes higher when reaching late game. On the old version, it was a fixed 30% damage reduction, but now it scales with levels starting from 21, reaching up to 35%. Skill 1 also received an additional 2 seconds of cooldown. Meanwhile, his second skill will now have lower damage and longer cooldowns as well. Basically weaker early game, but it's a different story when it reaches late game. Next, we have the nerf on Hayabusa. They have shortened the attack animation on his ultimate, specifically for the higher levels. Right here, we have a level 1 and level 3 ultimate used at the same time. As you can see, both had the same duration. They ended at the same time, even though the level 3 had more strikes. It's a nerf because Wind of Nature can now absorb most of his damage. But that's not all, because his ultimate is also getting a damage nerf. From 75 down to 60% extra physical attack. Tough luck for our Hayabusa players. Next, we have the nerf on Lolita. The interval of her passive shield is now longer, from 5 to now 6 seconds. And instead of only magic power, her max HP will now also affect how much shield she can give. This should weaken the amount of shield from her passive. Moving on, we have the nerf on Roger. To balance his power, they had to increase the cooldown of his ultimate by 3 seconds in the early stages. This aims to reduce the frequency of transformation between forms. And his defense boost is also getting slashed with a minus 20 to 15 points. Hopefully it's enough to free up some of our marksmen who are now barely used because of Roger. Next, we have the nerf on Julian. The developers have lowered the damage of his enhanced first skill. That's minus 10 to 30 points of base damage at different levels. I don't think it will make a big difference though. Next is the nerf on Zushin. There's an issue with Zushin where her wave clear is weak, but her crowd control is too strong. To fix this, the following adjustments had to be made. Number 1, her second skill will no longer consume mana unless it hits an enemy hero. You can use it on minions and jungle creeps, and your mana won't budge. But if you use it on a hero, your mana will start draining. Number 2, the mana cost of his second skill is now higher, which means it's harder to pull consecutively. Number 3, her first and ultimate will also have 0 mana requirement. Number 4, they've removed the effect where her second skill does not consume mana during her ultimate state. And finally, her stacks is lowered to 20, but each stack will now give more mana. So basically, it's easier to clear minions, but harder to pull enemies consecutively. You now have to take a break before you can pull again. Next is the nerf on Zask, and they made his first skill weaker in the early game. Its HP and defense is also lower in the early stages, but I don't think it's enough to move him out of the ban section. Next, we have the mana adjustments on Alice and Cecilion. Their mana stats are improved to make up for the lower mana stats of Clock of Destiny, which I'll show later. Next is Silas. He has been overperforming in ranked games, and now it's his time to get nerfed. His attributes are being downgraded because he was benefiting too much from the recent item adjustments. And those are your hero adjustments on this patch. Now let's move on to the items, and I think it's a big one. First up, the new Twilight Armor is here. The damage activation is now lower, making it more effective on a wider range of damage. And there's the fixed 20% damage reduction right when you buy the item. That means you don't need to stack up too much on HP to utilize the effect. You might want to add this to your build right now. Next is the nerf on Thunderbelt's true damage. The scaling is now based on extra instead of total defense stats. That means less true damage because it only counts the defense from emblems, items, and skills. Next is Clock of Destiny. It now gives 10% cooldown reduction, but its mana stat is cut in half from 800 down to 400. But don't worry because Wishing Lantern is here. They've added 400 mana points to its base stats. There's also an additional 5 points of magic power. So basically combine these two and you got your old Clock of Destiny mana stats. Next is the weaker burn effect of Glowing Wand. The developer said it was too versatile because of the Life Bane effect. To balance, its burn damage is now based on 1% of the target's max HP instead of the old 1.5. Moving on, we have some in-game optimizations. Most of the marksmen will now move more quickly after each basic attack interval. This allows for a more smoother experience when moving while attacking. Next, we have the skill range indicators. You can now see the exact range of their skills. Example is Odette's ultimate. As you can see, the edge of the skill is now more visible. This should help players see the exact location and range of their skills. And that's it for our official server recap. Honestly, I'm quite excited for the Twilight Armor, Claude, and Arlott. So how was your first game after the patch? What changes will make a big impact on the new meta? Share it in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.